Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So this video is a quick preview, I guess, for the undercard of Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol. As you guys know, main event, for me, one of the best fights in boxing. It's the fight that I've been looking forward to most this year. The main event sells this card regardless for me, so bear that with a, take that with a, take that for what it is. But, since Saudi Arabia have come into boxing, one of their trademarks has been strong undercards on most of the cards they've put forwards. And that's been a welcome addition to boxing for us fans, right? For a long time, we've been complaining about dreadful, uninspiring undercards that most top promotions have produced in recent years. Saudi Arabia and Turkey Al-Sheikh have kind of bucked that trend with their recent cards. However, this card in particular, the undercard, has been criticised online by numerous fans, I would say. And I wanted to share my thoughts on this card, going fight by fight, and I'll give you my brief summary at the end. So we have Opetaia making his return to the ring, defending his IBF Cruiserweight title. I'm very impressed with Opetaia, as you guys know. I think he is the best cruiserweight in the world right now. Fights with a beautiful rhythm, lovely jab, good technical boxer. Does have a bit of power as well, has a bit of a mean streak at times. Really, really exciting fighter is Opetaia. He is defending against Jack Massey. Now, on the surface, this one is disappointing. But at the same time, they tried to make a unification for Opetaia. They were targeting Chris Billam-Smith, who holds the WBO Cruiserweight title. But Chris Billam-Smith said the turnaround was too short. I believe his reasoning was he was on vacation, so by the time he came back, he would have a short training camp. That's disappointing. Listen, I wanted to see Opetaia in a unification. Chris Billam-Smith says no. The other two cruiserweight champions right now, Noel Givor, the WBC champion. Who's the WBA champion? I forget, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's disappointing there's no unification. Jack Massey, Jack Massey is a good domestic fighter, was actually a pretty good amateur back in the day, had a bit of a renaissance with his last win. He beat Isaac Chamberlain in the UK. I believe he won the British and Commonwealth titles. The Commonwealth and European titles at Cruiserweight. That was actually a really good fight against Isaac Chamberlain. He was the rightful winner. So Massey is a good domestic level fighter. He's not... Opetaia has fought quote-unquote domestic-level UK fighters before, and he's destroyed them. Guys like Jordan Thompson and Elizoro, for example. But I do rate Jack Massey way above Jordan Thompson and way above Elizoro. Massey's shown a good chin throughout his career. He's got good defensive skills. I mean, he went up to heavyweight and gave Joseph Parker a half-decent fight, The same Joseph Parker who's, now beaten Wilder and Zhili Zhang in recent fights. Also had a fight back in the day against Richard Riakporhe, another close fight, gave Riakporhe a lot of trouble. So yeah, Massey is a tough, durable, domestic-level fighter. It's a fight that Opetaia should win, but I don't think he's going to blast out Massey in the same fashion that he did Elizoro or Jordan Thompson, to be honest with you. Massey's got a better chin than those guys. He's more experienced. He's just better all round, as far as I'm concerned. I expect this one to go rounds, to be honest. But yeah, disappointing, but at the same time, I get to see Opetaia fight. I like watching him fight, so could be better, could be worse, is what it is. It's not inspiring. Fabio Wardley versus Fraser Clarke for the British heavyweight title. What's not to like? If you're if you're a UK boxing fan and you pay attention to the domestic scene, the first fight between these two gentlemen was unbelievable. Back and forth affair. a lot of blood. It was a great, great fight. It really, really was. One of the best fights I've seen this year. People were debating what way it went. Some people felt Fraser Clarke won. Some people felt Fabio Wardley won. I felt a draw was about right. But the first fight was great. Clarke was dropped. Fabio Wardley had a grotesque facial injury. Lot of blood, like I said. It was a brutal fight first time around. And the rematch has to happen. And it's happening on this card. So, very excited for this fight. I have to say, you look at these two guys. Fabio Wardley was favourite last time. And I think Fraser Clarke exceeded a lot of people's expectations. Which is weird because Fabio Wardley did not have an amateur background at all. He literally had no amateur fights. Whereas Fraser Clarke was an Olympian. He was a bronze medalist. Had a lot of amateur fights. But he's not really been impressive as a pro. Whereas Fabio Wardley's shown some great athleticism, some really good power. He's dispatched the fighters at domestic level in good fashion. So going into the first fight, most people felt Wardley would win, including myself. And going into the second fight, I'm seeing a lot more people picking Fraser Clarke due to the first fight. And obviously, watching the first fight, I understand why. However, when I look at these two fighters, I don't see Fraser Clarke getting all that much better from the first fight. Whereas a guy like Fabio Wardley is younger, he's fresher, and I think he's got more ability to get better from that first fight in comparison to Fraser Clarke. I think Fraser Clarke basically is what he is at this stage in his career. He turned pro quite late, he's 33 years old. I don't really see him reinventing the wheel, whereas Fabio Wardley is still fresh. He's still the younger man here, 29 years old, still young for a heavyweight. And because he's got a lot of athletic ability, a lot of speed, a lot of foot speed, hand speed, power, I think he's got more scope to try different things and to come up with a different game plan potentially. But regardless, it's a fight that had to happen. It is happening. I'm very much looking forward to it. I have got Wardley though. I will make a separate prediction. I will make a separate prediction because maybe I'll change my mind, but I don't think I will. But I'll definitely make a prediction video for this fight, as I will the main event, obviously. Deeper down on the card. Now this is disappointing. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Kamil Moretta at middleweight. Disappointing. What else can I say? Chris Eubank Jr., it feels like he's had so many of these sort of fights. He keeps on saying he wants this fight, that fight, the other fight. All these big names he drops, but none of these fights ever happen. It feels like his career is in a perpetual state of staying busy. He'll have a stay busy fight here and there. Even then, he doesn't fight that regular. I long lost faith in Chris Eubank Jr. I lost faith in him a long, long time ago. I was hoping after the second Liam Smith fight, he would finally roll the dice and just say, fuck it, I'll fight Janabek or Lara, try and fight for a middleweight title, but that hasn't happened, and this is a crap fight. Kamil Moretta, he's a game guy, he's an honest pro, but zero power to speak of. Not the quickest guy in the world, not the most physically robust guy in the world. We saw Golovkin, an ancient Golovkin, go through this guy like a doorway. We saw Munguia beat this guy down. Listen, he's a tough guy at a certain level, but it's not the type of fight we want from Chris Eubank Jr. It's shit or bust for me with Chris Eubank. He should be trying to fight a guy like Janabek, for example. And apparently Janabek was open to fight Eubank Jr., but Eubank didn't want to know. So there you go. This fight basically summarises Chris Eubank Jr.'s entire career. To be honest, that's how I feel anyway. So yeah, very, very disappointing. This is an interesting one. Shakur Stevenson versus Joe Cordina. Shakur is going to be defending his WBC lightweight title. Of course, Shakur Stevenson has signed with Eddie Hearn. I'll be honest, I'm disappointed by this fight. I'm disappointed by this fight. I would have hoped Turki Al-Sheikh would have tried to bankroll Shakur Stevenson versus Williams Opetaia because, Turki said he wants that fight, but it appears that Shakur gets a welcoming fight, I guess, to Matchroom, and that's basically what this fight is. You could sell it better if, like, Joe Cordina, of course he was a former IBF super featherweight champion. If let's say Joe Cordina beat Kakache, if he beat Kakache, then moved up and fought Shakur, you could say, well, you know what, Cordina was too big for super featherweight, he was a world champion, never lost his title, let's give him a title shot. And you could sell it a lot better, but that's not the case here. Joe Cordina, in his last fight against Anthony Kakache, got bashed up and knocked out. By the way, Kakache was a massive underdog in that fight. It wasn't like Cordina lost to a pound-for-pound generational talent. No, he lost to a big underdog. A guy who's been at domestic level his entire career in Anthony Kakache. And he got punched around that ring like a red-headed stepchild. Awful performance, bad look for him. Bad defeat. Bad defeat. And here he is, coming off a loss in the division below, coming up to lightweight, and he gets a title shot at Shakur Stevenson. It's disappointing for me. It's disappointing. Cordina's an okay fighter, by the way. He's a solid fighter, but he got knocked out quite recently. He got bashed up quite recently. When was that exactly? Yeah, only in May. He took a beating in that fight, and he's already back against a guy like Shakur Stevenson, a world champion. So, listen, man, it's disappointing. It's disappointing. Shakur Stevenson has to look good in this fight. He has to look good. He's got a guy who is maybe damaged goods in Joe Cordina, a guy who's coming off a knockout, a guy who's coming up in weight, a guy who's not expected to win. Shakur has to put on a show because I struggle to remember Shakur's fights. I'm not even trying to meme or like take the piss. But, the Artem Haratunian fight wasn't a great watch. The Edwin De Los Santos fight was honestly one of the worst fights I've seen. The Yoshino fight was better from Shakur. He actually looked pretty good in that fight. But the Robson Conceição fight was another stinker. The last couple of years, he's had one decent performance to really speak about. And aside from that, just boring fight after boring fight, he needs to put on a show. If you're going to fight a guy like Joe Cordina, coming off a knockout loss, coming up in weight, a guy whose confidence is probably shaken, plus he's changing trainers also, you have to look good. Let's just be honest. You have to look good. I want to see a Shakur Stevenson who is more aggressive, who is more assertive, and I want to see him push the pace and try to get a stoppage in this bout. Will he do that? Who knows? But listen, if Shakur Stevenson isn't fighting a guy like a Devin Haney, or a Tank Davis, or a Williams Opetaia, etc., Lomachenko, if he's not in those sort of fights, I'll be honest, I'm not really interested. I'm not really interested. I'll be a liar if I said otherwise. Further down on the card, big disappointment, Sky Nicholson versus Raven Chapman. Don't care. That was one good thing about these Saudi cards, was that there was no female boxing. I hope this isn't a trend going forwards. But red mark there for Turki Al-Sheikh, not interested. We then move on to Ben Whitaker versus Liam Cameron. Ben Whitaker, of course, former Olympian, former silver medalist, I believe, at light heavyweight in the Tokyo Games in 2021. He's been making the rounds in the pros early in his career, 8-0. He's kind of flattered to deceive, in my opinion. He's had some flashy moments against nondescript opponents, but, in his last fight against the Nigerian fella, he looked kind of poor, in my opinion. Couldn't get the knockout, and I felt it was a dull watch. I'm not convinced by Ben Whitaker, to tell you the truth. Liam Cameron is a domestic level guy, I guess you would say. Actually, he actually had a 4-year drug ban due to being found. his drug test contained traces of cocaine and he got a 4-year ban. So he's come back quite recently, the last year or so, trying to take certain fights. You know, he fought Lyndon Arthur previously, gave Lyndon Arthur a decent fight. But yeah, I expect Ben Whitaker to win this fight. Liam Cameron is a tough guy, you know, experienced, but Ben Whitaker's got the speed, he's got the youth. He'll win this fight, in my opinion. It's just whether he can stop Liam Cameron. Liam Cameron is relatively durable. He's quite tough. So it's an okay step for Ben Whitaker, in my opinion. It's an okay fight for him from a matchmaking perspective. But again, it's basically a showcase fight. It's a developmental fight, is what it is. So yeah, overall, again, not really all that interested. So yeah, when you look at the card as a whole, it's definitely the weakest Saudi card we've seen, in my opinion. It's definitely the weakest card we've seen. Aside from the main event, the only fight I'm really looking forward to is Fabio Wardley versus Fraser Clarke. That's really it, to be honest with you. That's really it. Aside from that, I mean, I've got some intrigue watching Jai Opetaia, but I can't see the fight itself being all of that enthralling. And I guess you'd say Shakur Stevenson just because he's high profile, but I don't really care for the fight he's in. So you look at this card as a whole, and it's certainly the weakest that Saudi have put forth so far. Having said that, in comparison to the opposition, in comparison to what other promoters are doing, you could argue it's still better than most undercards we see these days, so that goes to show where boxing's at, maybe. But yeah, the undercard for me is average at best. But yeah, I do like Wardley versus Clarke. I am looking forward to watching Opetaia fight, so there's a couple of things to look forward to. But anyway, share your thoughts below. Don't usually do these sort of one-take live videos, but yeah, I thought why not? When you're doing a undercard preview, it kind of makes sense. But anyway, share your thoughts below, guys. Beanie Guy Del.